Hello, and thank you for listening to Rivers of the Mind Season 1.5. If this introduction fails to amuse you, then you can just skip about a minute 15 seconds ahead in the podcast. But since writing this introduction amuses me just fine, here it goes. Season 1.5 is like Rivers of the Mind, but focusing on side characters who might be important later on, or just on the events between Seasons 1 and 2 that you may want to know about. Just to be clear, Rivers of the Mind is not meant to condone education in the sciences, the development of superhuman powers, or wormhole technology. All events portrayed in Rivers of the Mind are completely fictional, and any resemblance to actual events or people, whether real or imagined, is simultaneously real and imagined, as are all things when reduced to their most basic level of existence. With all of that said, please enjoy this episode of Rivers of the Mind, entitled How Dr. Desiree Elizabeth Whitebalm Tore a Hole in the Universe.
At first, all the colors seemed to glide like keys on a piano. Reds turned to oranges, oranges turned to yellows, and rambled up the spectrum until the only color was purple, and then that color became black. And with every octave of red through which the colors passed, the centers of illumination around which they focused themselves shifted, creating a pulsing that was all around me the moment I opened my eyes. The color and the light first came from all around, and grew dimmer and dimmer until only a few distant X-ray machines could be seen, illuminating faraway floors in other sections of the hospital wing, and then nothing but a faint red light coming off of my skin. As the red light fell into purple, and then blue, and then green, in fluid, seamless succession, the world filled with light again, which multiplied as every heat source gave off bright light, followed by every person's cell phone or radio or pager.
How are you feeling?
Asked a nurse, smiling as I saw his face between a vaguely defined skeleton, a normal person, and a being covered in bright red and white light. I can see, savoring the moment, the experience of seeing someone as notoriously brilliant as myself reduced to an incoherent burn patient. She chuckled slightly.
She says she can see!
Shouted the nurse over his shoulder.
She's awake?
Replied another. Immediately a crowd formed, vaguely despondent. No one wanted to tell me I was the only survivor. It took no small effort to learn to control what I imagined to be the flow between spectrums. One, I supposed, represented what my brain thought was electromagnetic light. One octave higher, I must have been thinking of ultraviolet light. In the next, X-rays, and then gamma. Back down, I could see in, infrared, microwave, radio. If I thought of one, then I could go there, or convince myself I could. Maybe some kind of brain damage. It was bizarre, but enjoyable once I learned to view it as a modest amusement. Imagine if this were real, I'd think. Imagine if you really were a source of weak gamma waves. Imagine if you could see light coming from that man's walkie-talkie. And if I became immersed enough in one of these meaningless fantasies, I could start to pick it apart. I could move my field of vision close enough to a wall that I could start to see the fibers that made up its surface, and then the single-celled organisms crawling over that surface, and then the clouds of electrons that weaved over tiny nuclei free taus and positrons escaping for billionths of seconds. And underneath this still, layer upon layer of intricate forces between increasingly small units of reality, all eventually starting over at their beginning. I could imagine electrons passing through barriers impenetrable according to the laws of classical physics. I could see photons of all colors reflecting against the wall in hundreds of different wavelengths, until they bled into a plain white in my eyes. I pictured myself brushing the photons around me aside and scattering them away, distorting the field of vision in a way that I imagined the doctor reacting to, or saw the doctor reacting to. He pressed a stethoscope against my chest and leaned in to look at my eyes and ears.
Are you feeling any pain at all?
No, I said, mystified suddenly, as I could see the molecules of air ripple towards him, producing what he heard as my voice.
Good,
he said, producing the same rippling vibration. If I could choose not to see it, though, I didn't have to. But what if it was real? I imagined myself grabbing onto the photons in the air, tuning them to the same frequency. This filled the room, for a second, with a flash of blue light. The doctor glanced up at the bulb.
I will have to see someone about that. Anyway, I'm sure you're getting tired of all these questions. I know I would be. But someone else is going to be in to ask a little bit more about it too. But here, let me just...
In pretty short order, I was on my feet again. The doctors were surprised by how rapid a recovery I was making. They only advised that I keep a liquid diet since I was having trouble keeping down food. I was starting to have cravings for other things. I'd like to give an example, but most of my examples are too sophisticated for laymen. How about... what do laymen do? Yeah. Imagine you've finished leaving an uninformed comment on a YouTube video about space travel, and before you go to your job as an accountant or a marketing executive or a customer service person, you want to eat, so you microwave yourself a burrito, or at least whatever passes for a burrito in that moment. Well, it was exactly that, only there was no burrito, just a microwave. I would feel the strongest desire to sit next to the microwave, and I just kept craving it every 5 minutes. I mean, eventually I figured out how to hold myself over for a few hours by getting rid of some of the microwave Faraday cage. But even that wasn't enough. Somehow, as much if not more than I needed food, I needed radiation. When I sat by the microwave, the radiation would enter my skin and slowly drop in color until it disappeared, forming a weak, ever-dissipating aura, which made me feel full, but I needed more. Luckily, if it was radiation I wanted, I had access to it, but regardless, I felt a need to approach this with some reserve. For one, it was particularly expensive to accrue sources of radiation. Moreover, there were certain risks posed by exposure to large quantities of radiation, both to laymen and to scientists. Attempts to discern to what extent I was hallucinating and to what extent my visions represented reality threw me for a loop for a while. But regardless, I needed to eat something, and even with the liquid diet, I was having trouble finishing more than a sip or a bite at a time. In spite of the risks, I gave up. I found a highly radioactive pellet of metal in a sealed lead crate. Immediately after unwrapping it, I began to feel more satisfied, strength returning to my muscles. The metal began to shrink, undergoing rapid alpha and beta decay. I wasn't hungry for the next week, and I still had all of my hair. I'd experienced a previously undocumented change in physiology brought by my exposure to a radiation that we identified as gamma triple prime. This name was somewhat erroneous, as closer examination revealed that it did not consist of photons at all, but the name stuck amongst some of the laymen working at the base. And when the layman named something, it was unfortunately quite difficult to reverse that process. I was unprepared to come forward with either a more accurate description of whatever the energy they had found was, and likewise unprepared to present my new vision or hunger for radiation to others at the base. Everyone was on edge enough as it was, and still in mourning for many of their colleagues who had just been present the night of the experiment. Perhaps more importantly, it seemed as though the changes in my physiology invited military applications. With only a focus, I could easily manipulate ordinary light into higher, more destructive frequencies, or concentrate it into narrow beams. This was excellent for scientific research, but I feared it would also be excellent for, say, warfare or a number of applications that did not sit well with me. I chose instead to work in private, as I was prone to doing, and to experiment as best I could with my abilities, working on developing instruments that could, in whatever way, mimic what I was doing. I'd sent in 3 papers with new theorems for review and submitted patents for the equipment that enabled us to detect the energetic anomaly occurring 1 kilometer northeast of our laboratory. Research at the laboratory boomed. Minor improvements in our knowledge of quantum physics enabled progress on wormhole technology, space travel, and material sciences to expand exponentially. I soon was surrounded by a team of scientists who could at last keep up with and respect the demands I placed on them. Every morning at 7:30 a.m., we would wake up, eat breakfast, and go to work by 8:30. At 3 in the afternoon, after we broke for lunch, we would commence with more work, generally concluding at around 11 or 12 at night. I didn't feel alone, at all, in Romania any longer. The laboratory was surging back to life, outdoing all of our wildest expectations. Perhaps we were a little bit too optimistic. The gravitational wave detected above the farm, appearing to me to be a great purple column housing a dense vortex, seemed to be a perfect opportunity to test our wormhole device. Unexpectedly, however, the wormhole device led to a total collapse of the phenomenon. The portal formed incompletely, leading to a leakage of so-called gamma triple prime into the earth, and the breaking of an upper level of limestone, exposing a large sinkhole. The optimistic spirit of the past 5 days had been broken. We began to see that we'd gone too far before we were ready, that all of our advances were only fractions of what needed to be done. But I knew something more. Down on the ground, the accident had exposed the inhabitants of the small rural neighborhood to sufficient amounts of gamma triple prime to put them through similar changes to what I'd experienced. I quickly presented the events to the chief military official at the base, Colonel Imes, warning him that anyone exposed to more than 0.05 moles of the substance was likely to be at risk for major health complications. Understanding that the security of the base was at stake, we rushed into action.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Rivers of the Mind. My name is Timothy Vilgiate, the writer and creator and producer of Rivers of the Mind. In this episode, you heard Isioma West playing the part of Dr. Whitebalm, Timothy Vilgiate playing the part of the doctors, and one of the interns, along with Sophie Doss, who played the other intern in the conversation that happened in the hallway. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please remember that Season 2 is coming out in July to August-ish, and we're going to start recording in May. If you want to go onto Patreon and support us, the Patreon is patreon.com/Timmy Vilgiate, Vilgiate. I hope that you enjoyed it, and have a great night. Also, in case you didn't hear it, we actually have the conversation that the 2 interns had in the special podcast-only uncensored cut of that Easter egg, just because it's in there, I guess. It's funny. Just listen to it.
Dude, I saw that too.
You saw that guy?
He looked fucked up.
Oh my god, yeah, he was tripping balls.
Dude,
Did you fucking see
he
him?
was on some good shit or something.
Oh my god, yeah, like, I'm on some of
Like,
that shit. This
dude,
place sucks.
he's probably, yeah, man, I know.
This is like the worst
Hey,
fucking
hey,
what was it?
You should come by my place. I'm making some really nice acid.
What the fuck, dude? You weren't supposed to do that here.
Shut up.
You can't use the lab equipment for that.
Dude, I know, but we're also gonna get this high-grade shit.
What are you telling Dr. Whitebalm you're doing?
I told her I'm doing acid.
What did she say?
She said,
She
okay.
probably, she probably just was like, she probably wasn't even listening. She was probably typing or
She
something.
probably was. I mean, she's like, okay, cool, but I don't know. She was on her computer, so.
Yeah, she probably, like, don't let her find out about that, man.
I told her about it, though.
Okay, yeah, but seriously, you have to give me some of that shit.
Dude, I'll totally help you out.